if somebody sends me a track and I flick through it and it sounds like the other 30 demos that I've heard this week, well, sorry, I'm not going to listen to it anymore. I'm not going to play it. As a DJ, I'm looking for stuff that stands out. Of course, we're looking for music that is capable, that is well produced, but that's something different. We're looking for something that stands out, that makes your tracks, whatever you've got in my inbox, that stands out, that I can play, and that works for you. We want to develop you. We want to develop what you have to say, and I think that's so important. So, if we look at this picture, what stands out to you? All these birds up there, or this one down here? It's an obvious thing. This one stands out. So, I guess in music, like I said before, what's missing nowadays is creativity. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from different places. When I started making hardstyle, my inspiration really came from noise controllers and from headhunters. And the first few tracks that I was working on really tried to sound that way. And that's okay, that's part of learning. But you don't become a respected artist by chasing somebody else's spotlight. It just doesn't happen that way. Now, like I said before, if somebody sends me a demo and it sounds like a poor imitation of a frontliner track, well, sorry guys, I'm going to play a frontliner track, not that track. And the reason being is because I know that as a DJ, I want a good reaction. However, if you have something that stands out that's a little bit different, and it just has a cool factor to it, a wow factor to it, then guess what? I'm going to pick that up, it's going to grab my attention. And for other people, they're going to do the same thing as well. I think what's more important, that if you want you to stand out as an artist, that you've got to make outstanding music. Be impressive. Impress people by being impressive. Of course, this is different to developing your skill. Developing your skill is something that comes through learning and through imitation. That's just one of the things. Like when you're in school, somebody writes a problem up on the board, the teacher writes a problem, you all copy it down and figure out how it works. You learn through textbooks, mass-produced media, so that you can learn and understand how the process of something works. But then after that, after you gain a mastery of that, that's when you can be creative with it. So, it's a bit dark, but who's seen this painting? Who knows what it is? Okay. Anyone? Somebody? It's a Nachtwacht. Yeah. It's from Rembrandt. Now, for some people who don't know what this is a really, really famous painting from a Dutch artist that came from the Renaissance. And Rembrandt is remembered as a legend for doing something that other people weren't doing at that time. And the big artwork itself, if you go and look at it, it looks pretty cool. For me, when I saw it for the first time, I thought the Nachtwacht was like, okay, it's a bit like a picture. I've seen other things more interesting. But at that time, the reason why he stood out is because he took a couple of things and arranged it slightly differently. And that's why people remember, sup, take a seat, why he is a legend and not his contemporaries around him. The idea itself of what he did is not anything new. Still life is not new. The way that he painted, if we take a look, having a scene like this in art is not a new concept. When he did it, it wasn't necessarily new, but the way he did it, the way that he presented it, was a little bit different, and that's why he's remembered, and not his students, and not his teachers. So, we can learn from Rembrandt. I guess we have to really define sometimes what I'm talking about. Creativity. What is it? What are we trying to do here? How are we trying to stimulate this? What am I talking about? Creativity is the ability to be able to see something that isn't there, to be able to create something that isn't quite there, and then present it in a way that's kind of new and fresh. I think it's also taking something from one place and putting it where it doesn't normally belong. That's kind of creativity. If somebody takes a pen and starts drawing something, and they start drawing something really like average, whatever. The moment they start doing an elephant, start putting horns or whatever, and it starts looking really strange, now they're being creative. They're being a little bit different. So, we're talking about our brain, we're talking about our mind. We have to understand that our brain is a processor. What goes in, comes out. So believe it or not, everybody out there has one of these things, and we can develop it. So if you want your music to stand out, develop this so that you can make outstanding music. Okay. Got to go through my notes. Look, we're all equipped with really, really cool computer. So it stands to reason that you should try and absorb as many interesting experiences as you can do so that you can stimulate your brain. What I've done as a habit is whenever I watch a movie, I collect the cool soundtrack that I like. I think that's really interesting because that way you can experience the music for itself in a different context and see if you get the same feelings. If you experience an emotion in one place and then figure out how that works, then that way you can replicate it. So if you're always seeking new experiences, be it going to the beach every morning or eating different kinds of foods, all that stuff actually stimulates your brain and actually stimulates your creativity. And believe it or not, will be reflected in your music. It's crazy. The idea of eating different foods that is going to make you better music sounds really weird. But it does, because your brain, if it's constantly stimulated, means that you're going to come up with new and interesting experiences. What goes in, comes out. So let's say you're going through the radio and you hear a cool track that you like. I think it's important to not just get that track. Look up the entire discography of your artist, of this track that you like. Then read as many interviews, see what inspires them, try and get the whole feeling of how they put something together, and then see what inspires those artists. And keep on going and keep on digging, feeding yourself so that that way you can be inspired to come up with new and interesting things. For example, I was talking about movie scores before. If you find that a particular cue, a particular part of a movie score makes you feel a certain way, see if you can dissect that, rearrange that, see if it gives you the same feeling if you completely rearrange it, or if you replicate it playing with different instruments in different keys, see what happens. Do the same thing for all the media that you consume, be it games or TV shows or even comic books. Change the way that you experience media so that way you can stimulate yourself and then your music is more stimulating. I think it's really important as a music producer to embrace different genres. And the reason being is because not everything is so disconnected as some people will have you believe. You don't necessarily have to like something to understand how it works or to even appreciate how it works. I remember the first time I tried sushi. I was like, what the hell? Why? I don't want to taste anything raw. This is stupid. I want a nice steak. Salt, pepper on it, maybe a side of fries. I like a nice steak. Why would I have some raw tuna out of the sea with some weird wasabi paste in it? Why? Why would I do that? Nevertheless, I persisted. I tried to understand how it works, and I could appreciate it for, okay, this is not necessarily for me it is my thing now, but when I tried it, it wasn't necessarily my thing. So I think it's important to also understand different kinds of music, how they work, and also in the context of how they work as well. For example, I don't know if anybody here likes metal. It's not my thing. You like metal? Cool, man, that's cool. The thing is, I think that if you just pop on a metal CD and just listen to it by itself, it can be a little bit, it's not the full experience. Go to a concert, however, get really drunk, and then experience a metal concert, and it's something completely different. If you experience the media, the genre, the music in the context that it's meant to be, that can also change the way that you understand it. And I think that's so important. Even if you don't like it, the thing is, you learn. You learn about the music, and you learn about yourself. So, listen, why am I talking about other genres, and why am I not necessarily talking about hardstyle? Well, look, I think if we understand the origins and the purpose of this music, of hardstyle music, we can understand the guidelines of what people set out to do, and then that gives us a certain freedom of what we can do with our own music if we decide to do hardstyle or any other harder music in general. Hardstyle was kind of born around 2000-ish, 2001-ish, and it was made, well, it's a kind of combination, really. It was like some Italian techno, a bit of UK hard house, some German hard trance, and funny enough, played by hardcore DJs who wanted to slow things down and make music and play music for girls. And that's cool. Totally cool. But the origin of the music wasn't necessarily to be the hardest. It wasn't necessarily to be the fastest. It wasn't necessarily to be anything. It was meant to be just fun, tougher dance music. So with that in mind, what that means is there's less guidelines than we think there is when it comes to that kind of music. We don't necessarily have to be at this speed, or it has to be in this key, or this particular style of kick for it to be hardstyle, because that was never the purpose of the music. The purpose of the music was, yeah, a little bit tougher than this, and a little bit slower than that, and a bit of a combination from here, there, everywhere, and that's what hardstyle was. When we understand that, we can be more free, and we can be more creative. Now, it's important to understand that, like everything of our body, stuff needs rest. So when you train your brain, when you absorb new experiences, take a break. Give it a rest. We've all been there, we've been in the studio, and we've been going straight for 10 hours, and then nothing makes sense anymore, and you've forgotten what the letter L looks like. That's happened to me plenty of times. I've walked out and been, where am I? Who am I? That happens. You've got to give yourself a rest, especially when you're taking on new experiences, especially when you're making music. And don't pretend you know everything. This is a common problem that I find with up-and-coming producers, is more that they feel like they need to know everything, and they look down on people who don't. Don't be like that. We're always learning. I'm always learning. A couple of days ago, first thing I did when I woke up in the morning, go to YouTube. How do I make a screech like such and such? How do I make a growl like such and such? Because not everyone knows everything. No one knows everything. So that's okay. Absorb new experiences. Learn. Be humble. So part of training your brain, part of training this, and then being able to get what is inside your mind out into the real world through music, is through what I call mental workouts, or training yourself. So a really good way to do this is what I call reverse engineering. Pull up your favorite track, cut a section out of it, listen to what's going on there, and then trying to copy it. Now, I'm not saying with the purpose of actually using that to make a full track, but more understanding yourself, understanding the process, and how you can equip yourself for whenever inspiration strikes. That's so important. Reverse engineering is how we learn. When we're in class and we've got that maths problem up on the board, essentially what the teacher is getting us to do is reverse engineering. When you're learning art and you're learning how to draw, same thing. You learn this, you learn that. These kind of techniques, reverse engineering. It's so important. And it's not just related to music, it's related to everything. But the thing is, as you practice these skills, as you reverse engineering, you don't stop there. Because that's the problem. When you go out there, people have worked out how to sound like Martin Garrix, and great, more power to them. But they've stopped at that. And that means that everything's kind of sounding the same. That's a problem. Don't stop at just imitating. Don't stop at just understanding these small things and being able to do it yourself. Keep on learning and then keep on developing. Where you feel that somebody's done a particular thing in a particular way, make it yours. Because that is going to make your music stand out more than anything else. Then, wow, more people, goodness me. Hi, take a seat. If you've just walked in, let me do a little recap. First off, hi, I'm Audiofreq. Second off, this isn't going to be your typical production seminar. In fact, we're really going to focus on production quite small. We're going to focus more on creativity, because I think that's more important. You want your music to stand out, so develop a way of understanding on how to make your music stand out through being more creative. Okay. So when you've been doing all of this, and you've been reverse engineering, you've been learning and all this kind of thing, once again, take a break. Nothing wrong with taking a break. Something that I do quite often. Actually, I'm not in the studio 5-6 days a week. I think it's actually really unhealthy. I'm in the studio 3 days a week, because the rest of the time I'm digesting things. I'm looking for new inspiration, not in the studio. And you can just be like, chilling or playing Destiny. It's, the new habit that I've got, the new addiction that I've got. But the thing is, that's all part of the process of being able to be creative, because you've got something there, you take a break from it, you think about it, it's in the back of your mind, you can daydream, you can meditate on it, and then when you go back to the studio, you're fresh, you're refreshed. Because like everything, the brain is a muscle that gets tired. So, I was out last night, I was at Colt. That was fun, a little bit too much fun, and I needed time to recover. Recover. People taking a break is so important. All right. I think this is really cool. So if you can't see it, I'm going to read it out to you. I thought using loops was cheating, so I programmed my own using samples. Then I thought using samples was cheating, so I recorded my own real drums. Then I thought programming them was cheating, so I learned to play drums for real. Then I thought using bought drums was cheating, so I learned to make my own. Then I thought using pre-made skins was cheating, so I killed a goat and I skinned it. Then I thought that was cheating too, so I grew my own goat from a baby goat. I also think that's kind of cheating, but I don't know where I should go from here. But I haven't made any music lately with all the goat farming and everything. All right. I think this is a really, really, really cool way to look at creativity as well, because everything is actually a remix. All the stuff that we do, all the music that we make, is kind of built up on concepts and stuff that people have done in the past. But that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's quite freeing. Because what it means is that we can steal stuff, and it's okay because everybody does it. And that's part of making art. It's not a problem. I showed you the Rembrandt thing beforehand. The concept of what made him stand out, using the lighting and the shading, if you know anything about art and know anything about Rembrandt, the reason why he stands out because of that painting is actually a concept stolen from an Italian painter from a couple of years beforehand. So there's nothing wrong with it. Everything is a remix. Art is a remix. Music is essentially a remix. Carl Sagan is, or was rather, a very famous scientist and philosopher from the United States. And he said that if you want to make an apple pie, first you must invent the universe, because really you're taking something from someone else and you're kind of remixing it in a sense of chopping it up, but you didn't invent the knife and you didn't invent the apple and you certainly didn't grow the wheat that turned into the pastry. So why limit yourself and think that you need to be the creator of everything when essentially that's not possible? I think that something you should do to help stimulate yourself is actually go to this website, www.everythingisaremix.info. It's really cool because it gives you a whole bunch of real-world examples of classic tracks, really interesting and innovative rock tracks and pop tracks and so on and so forth, that actually, well, concepts are stolen from other people, that were stolen from other people, that were stolen from other people. And you know what? That's okay. So don't pretend like if something is sampled from somewhere else or something is taken from somewhere else, within reason, you know, if people start using each other's kicks, you know, taken out of other people's tracks, it's not really being creative. That's not seeing something that isn't there. But on the other hand, you know, maybe taking something from a forgotten track or a speech from somewhere else and then really ruining it, cutting it up into something really original, that's being creative, and feel free to do so. I think this is also really cool, just in line with that. Good artists copy, great artists steal. The thing is, though, it's about how you steal and where you steal it from. You see, if everybody just goes to, you know, the Beatport a cappella section, downloads a bunch of stuff, and just kind of like, all right, cool, I'm going to take this and lift it, and it's not really being creative. And the other thing is, everyone's kind of doing it. That said, if you watch a whole bunch of 1950s science fiction films, find this one sample right at the end, twist it up into saying something completely different, that's cool, and there's nothing wrong with it. So, examples of this. I don't have the music, but some really cool examples, I think, Attack Again from Noise Controllers. Now, I don't know if you already know this, but it's actually taken from a 90s hard trance record called It's a Dream from DJ Panda. Totally okay, because I think what Bus did with it is really, really cool and gave the track a completely different flavor and also introduced it to a new generation. Ticento as well from Techno Boy. In fact, a whole bunch of stuff from Techno Boy is just stolen from the 80s. And you know what? Totally okay. Feel free to steal, be creative with it. But this isn't a formula. You shouldn't always steal something from somewhere else. That's not the way that it works. I'm just saying you shouldn't be afraid to. Be clever, be creative. Look for things that aren't there. Look in places that people aren't looking. Now, something else that's really important, I think, when trying to be creative, is actually setting limitations. If you run out of original ideas, sometimes you can stimulate yourself in the studio by setting limitations of like, okay, I'm only going to work with these 4 things, and everything is going to come out of that. Or what would be interesting, I'd like to see this done, if somebody made a track of just kicks, but made leads, screeches, melodies, maybe even a vocal sample out of kicks. It's possible. I'd like to see it. Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. But the thing is, setting limitations can stimulate yourself in the studio. When you're stimulated, when you're coming up with original ideas with these limitations, guess what? Your music's going to stand out. Because if you say to somebody, hey, I've used 4 things in this track, it's a 4-minute track, and then all the other sounds come out of this thing, well, automatically that's going to grab attention. Automatically. So one of these ways of setting limitations, this is something I've done, this is just an example, is something that I call chance dance music. This is not for everyone, this is just an example. But basically it's the idea of having limitations, but randomized limitations to make some music. So, where's my bag? Just here. Hang on. This is it's a little bit different. But basically, I have these 4 dice, and these are my ideas generated. Pass them around. It's a weird-looking dice because I just wanted weird-looking dice. And weird-looking stuff is good because it stimulates you. But the whole idea of this concept is that I roll the dice, and each dice represents something different from music. One of those dice represents emotion, another one represents an approach, another one represents, different regional influences. In fact, I've got the chart right here. Like I said, this is not for everyone. This is just an approach to stimulate yourself in the studio, to be creative. Because if you set limitations like this, you can figure out ways to do things. If somebody says, I want you to make a track with just this sample, you have to use this, and it's a terrible sample, you're going to think about it and think about it. Well, maybe I could chop that there and put it like this, and I could stretch it like this and put it like that. Or if I reverse it, it sounds really weird. Maybe if I vocode it, it does something different. Setting limitations like this stimulates you, and guess what? It helps stimulate your music, and your music stands out. So this is kind of weird. Like, I'm actually using this to write my album. Using these dice, whenever I'm out of an idea, I see what happens. So, and it's totally, it seems like it doesn't make sense, but when I explain it to you, it can. So let's say I roll a 3, I roll a 6, I roll a 7, and then I roll a 10. So 3, 6, 7, and 10. So we've got an angry track that's kind of over the top, so really angry track, with some Middle Eastern influences, and it's a 10. It's a drum and bass track. So is it possible to do something that is like a really over-the-top drum and bass track with Middle Eastern influences that's angry? Totally possible. But setting these limitations means that, like I said, you're going to be more creative. This is just something that I'm doing at the moment. It's not for everyone. It could be as simple as just having a coin and flipping a coin when you're stuck for ideas. Do I go this key? Flip a coin. Do I do this? Flip a coin. Stuff like this, having these random limitations can help stimulate you. Not for everyone, but an idea. So, creativity, what is it? This is a cool little comic that sort of illustrates what's going on here. Like I said before, it's seeing something that isn't there. It's absorbing influences from other people and then putting them out there into the world. That's essentially what we're doing and what we should be doing. And if you view the process of making music and being creative like this, it's actually quite freeing because, well, I'm a bit guilty now. Like, I play Destiny because I'm getting fuel to be creative. Not really, but it helps to be able to experience things in this manner, where you're going someplace or seeing something to try and absorb this, and then later on, as you digest it, that can be inspiration for your new tune. The brain is a machine. What goes in, comes out. The other thing is, it's important to be forgiving of yourself, because if you have a crazy idea, don't shoot it down right away. When you're making music, often what happens, at least to me, I don't know, this is maybe something that happens to other people. I know it might not happen to all of you, but I guarantee it happens to some of you. You can shoot down your idea halfway through, or not even, before you get started. You're like, you know what? I've got this thing and the sample. Don't talk bad about yourself when you're in the middle of creating something. Just let the process be the process. See what happens. Develop things. Don't get stuck on doubt. That's bad. Be confident in what you're doing. Okay, so outstanding music. What does it mean? How do we get some practical things on what we can do? Okay, some tips that I've picked up from people, just from working with them in the studio, so from Headhunters or from Technoboy and Tuneboy, and even The Prophet, just ideas of what they've been saying, and we'll just chit-chat in the studio, they've said something, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, we can sum it up like this. Create as much character as possible, as much of a thing that is a little bit different as possible. Instead of using just a plain super saw patch from Nexus 2, not that there's anything wrong with that, it makes great layers, try and twist it up a little bit different so it stands out that it's a little bit different. Make it a little bit more unique. Give it some character. It's so important to give things character, because otherwise you'll end up like down the hall and it all kind of sounds the same. That's a problem. So give things character. Make things a little bit more unique and spend time on that. Don't just rush it. Oh, okay, well, I need to make something that has, it's a little bit more outstanding. No. Refine the process. Take your time, because what's more important in your music is that your music has quality. If you do one track a year, but that track is fantastic, absolutely brilliant, and everyone is playing it, that's a lot better than 20 tracks that no one is playing. It's a lot better to spend your time on it, to really get your quality up there, and to give things as much character as possible. Okay. Okay, one thing that's really, really cool when you're getting through a track is to reference and tweak every section, but dedicate it for as long a time as possible. Something that I'm quite guilty of, actually, is scattering here and there, and I've got an idea for here, and I've got an idea for there. Cool. I guess when you're being creative and everything, it's important to try and jot down what's in your head as the flow is there. But what's also really important is to refine everything and spend your time tweaking and dedicating yourself just to perfecting things. Like I said before, if you've got one track that stands out, that everyone is playing, or it's just of outstanding quality, that's a lot better. So if you really refine things, dedicate yourself to, like, you know what, this screech section is really only in the track for 30 seconds, but I want to perfect it, spend a whole day on it. There's nothing wrong with that, because that is going to last a lot longer. You're going to invest your time a lot better than if you just rush through, oh, I just need an offbeat screech, cool, done in 5 minutes. No, refine it, spend your time, develop as much as possible, and don't be lazy. I'm guilty of being lazy. There's a difference between working in the flow and just, getting things down there and everything is awesome. That's different to just being like, okay, well, yeah, that's good, that works. Don't do that. The other thing that's important is to expand your ideas. One of the other tools that I use in the studio quite a bit, actually, I use it more outside of the studio. Let's see if I've got it in my bag. It's just this book. I got it from V&D. It's a kind of fancy book, as you can see from the cover. But this is where I write down all my ideas wherever I am. So if I'm in the car and somebody else is driving, write it down. It's so important to be able to flesh out your ideas and develop your ideas, because as they have some sort of body, maybe it's the tactile sense of writing something down, it takes form. And when it takes form, you can digest it. That's an experience that you can use, and then when you get to the studio, you've written it down. I've got, let's see, I don't know if I can, there's no camera that I can put up on there, but I think I've got 3 or 4 tunes written in 3 or 4 different pages. It's kind of like, yeah, well, I like this from this there, and develop this from that there, and maybe I can use this a cappella from over here, and I twist it like this. It's so good to be able to do that, because by the time you get to the studio, you can get into the flow and just make music. Now, the other thing that's really important, actually, is maximizing your time when you're in the studio. You don't always have to be 100% productive, effective, super producer 100% of the time, because nobody does that. When you work in an office, that's not how it works. When you work anywhere, that's just not how it works. So what you need to do is understand that there are going to be some days where you should be focusing on one thing, and some days where you should be maybe writing or being more melodic or whatever. So something that I do quite a bit is just prepare myself. So I'll spend 2-3 days, not just on one kick, but making many variations of that kick. And then I'll spend 2-3 days working on a kick and bass or a screech or a set of growls or whatever it is. Having all these things, being able to divide your time up and maximizing your time between what I call sound design sessions, and then creative sessions or writing sessions, means that when you actually have that idea, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden the whole track comes to you in your head, you're prepared. It's so important to be prepared. Because if you're a caveman, like I said before, up on the screen, and you want to go hunting for that idea, you want to be prepared as much as possible. You want to have your tools there. Let's say you are this caveman, and all of a sudden you see this gigantic moose that you want to eat for dinner. If you don't have your tools ready, and if you're going to go charging after it, you're not going to catch it. You need to be prepared, need to be ready, get everything ready, so that when inspiration strikes, you can develop things as quick as possible in the flow, be creative, and then make your music, once again, stand out. The other thing that I've been doing in the last probably year is I call the 20-hour rule. Now, this is a bit tough, it's a bit harder. If you've developed your skills, this actually is a really cool way of working. But basically, if you don't have the solid layout for your track within 20 hours of working on it, scrap it. Now, I'm not talking about designing sounds specifically for the track, just like that. That's a bit difficult, because if you're working on like really intricate sections, and that stuff takes time. But if you don't have a solid concept and layout of your track in about 20 hours, scrap it. And there's nothing wrong with scrapping it, because what you've learned there, you can apply to different tracks. I've got a folder of maybe, I don't know, 20 ideas that I've rejected from this year alone. And that's okay, because I know that when inspiration strikes and I've got something, guess what? I can go through that. Well, I've made 20 rises in this thing and that thing, and I can grab the snares from here, and I can grab the kicks from there, and all of a sudden, boom, I can do something within 5 hours. In fact, most of the time, when people have made tracks in a very, very short period of time, I think, I don't know if you guys remember Tonight from Noise Controllers, Headhunters, and Wild Styles. That was done in a day. But the reason that was done in a day was because they weren't focusing so much on the sound design. They were grabbing bits here, there, everywhere, and then all came together in a day. Really, really cool to do that. But if you can't put something together within your 20 hours, into the reject folder, take all the parts out of it, take all the patches, take all the stems, everything, save it for later. Because you haven't really wasted that time. Don't ever view stuff like that as if you're wasting your time. Not at all. Instead, think of it as like, right, I haven't nailed it this time, but I can use all that stuff later on. You're building your arsenal, you're building your tools, you're getting ready for the next time. Now, another thing that happens to us all, it's inevitable, is writer's block. So, it's okay. Don't worry. If you're in a writer's funk at the moment and you're stuck and you can't come up with ideas, well, you're human. That's cool. So, the first thing to do is probably take a break. That's good. I think it's really important, like I've been mentioning beforehand, to take breaks regularly, often, and even for extended periods of time, because it allows your brain to sort of unhook from a problem and let things flow. Go do something different. Complete your mental diet. Go climb a mountain, watch a whole bunch of movies, spend 3 days on Netflix, doesn't matter. Get yourself out of the studio, or get yourself out of the bedroom, whatever it is, disconnect and take a break. The other thing is, don't force things too much. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about when it comes to sound design, that's different. That's mastering your tools, knowing your craft. That's very different. You know, often when we first start producing and we start working on sounds, it takes a long time to develop our arsenal because we just don't know how to do stuff. That's part of learning. So I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is like when you're being creative and stuff is just not happening, this just doesn't click or whatever it is. For some reason I can't get this there and you're forcing it, don't. Number one, take a break. The other thing is sometimes accept that, you know, if you're forcing it too much, it just doesn't happen. The flow doesn't work like that. And I think it's so important to understand that, you know, when you're in a creative flow, it is a flow. It's a state of mind. And if stuff is taking you out of it, you know what? Don't force it. It's okay. The other thing is, if you feel that you've got an idea that it's okay, it's not your best work, finish it anyway. I think that's really important as well, is that people develop the skills to be able to finish something, and then that way you can get better when something strikes, when you've got this killer concept, you can maximize it, and even no one has to hear this B track, C track, or whatever. No one has to hear it, but you can learn from it, and it's really important to finish these ideas that you have that are not necessarily your A-grade stuff. And be realistic when you're in a writer's block or when you're just making music. Sometimes things just don't work out, and that's okay. You don't have to be 100% creative 100% of the time. That's not part of it. But remember that you haven't wasted your time ever. If it takes you 4 years to master how to do something, that's 4 years well invested. I'm trying to think of when my first record came out, when I first produced something. I started making music in 1999. And now most of you probably hadn't heard of me until probably the last 3 years. That's okay. Because all that time, I'd spent honing my craft and understanding how to produce music and getting better at it. And that's okay. If the same thing happens to you, because I know a lot of people when they're starting out in this scene or in electronic music, they want to be recognized right away. They see up-and-coming producers. They only see the highlight reel. They don't see the full story. So I think it's really important to not get discouraged. You know, if you spend a lot of time understanding, working on your craft, and it takes you 10 years to get someplace, to get your first track finished, it doesn't matter. That's 10 years well invested. Not everyone works at the same pace. We're all individuals, but that's okay. Okay, so some more practical stuff. To try and help you've stimulated yourself, you've watched all the movies, you've done everything, and you're trying to come up with an idea. The first thing you should do when you're in the studio is kind of define your target. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to go for? Write it down. Maybe explain, on a piece of paper using a mind map, whatever it is. Define your target. I'm going to go for something that's a little bit like this. Little bit. Don't have to be too specific. The second thing is start gathering all the resources. You've spent 10 months making screeches, kicks, and what have you. Gather them. They're all in a folder. It's all nice and neatly organized. It's not kick as to have to 10, blah, 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 blah. No. Organize everything. Gather all your stuff. So that way, you can develop this idea really, really quickly. So you can stay inside that 20-hour window. And then finally, reference stuff. It's okay to be able to take bits of tracks and just use that as inspiration for use that as inspiration for structure or a kind of feeling for a sound or, mixdown. Referencing mixdowns is so important. Gather all these references as much as you can do. Gather all the tools that you need to, so that way you can start being creative really quickly. And then finally, paint a picture effectively. And what I mean by that is just be really clever with your decisions, be really creative and obvious with your effects, get stuff nailed down as tight as possible. Because that way, your music is going to be outstanding. If you nail all this stuff, if you get you spend all your time fixing up your library and getting everything done, then when you're putting everything together and you paint a really cool, effective picture, you've got an arrangement that's really tight and nailed, your music's going to be fantastic, and more people are going to pay attention to it. I think that's what it's all about. If you listen to what's been happening in our scene and in electronic music as a whole, a lot of stuff is sounding the same, and that's a problem. It's not necessarily that you shouldn't take influence from other people, but you should try and figure out to stimulate yourself so that your music can be more stimulating, because at the end of the day, more people are going to remember you for being you than you being a copy of somebody else. I hope you've got something from it. I hope you can take away something just about brainstorming and being a little bit different in the studio. It could be crazy things like rolling dice, flipping coins, or whatever, or it could be just spending a lot of time developing your libraries and everything, so that way you have references of sound so that you can be really quick in the studio and work in the flow. But I guess the most important thing is, develop yourself, develop your skills, and that way you can stand out and your music can stand out.